Hello and welcome to About Books. Today's episode comes to you from Edgehill University in Ormskirk. Edgehill Uni is Times Higher Education University of the Year for 2014 to 15. We start with Dr. John Cater, Vice-Chancellor of Edgehill University, and then we're going to move to an interview with Dr. James Byrne, who's a creative writer at Edgehill and who's going to tell us a little bit about Edgehill University's new press.
Been around a long time, first and foremost. It was actually founded in 1885 in Liverpool by 7 of the city's philanthropists, the Rathbones, the Holts and the like, and founded alongside the University of Liverpool. The reason it was founded actually was to provide educational opportunities for women of the city, and the colours of the university, right the way back from the 1880s right to today, are actually the colours of the suffragette movement, or actually they're almost the colours of the suffragette movement. The green is there, the purple, heliotrope, is there, but actually the students removed the white, which stood for purity, and put gold in for enlightenment instead. Now, philanthropic money ran out in the city. As you can probably guess, the First World War, Liverpool suffered, and also the Depression in the 1920s. And as a consequence of that, actually, it was taken into local authority control in the days of the County Palatine, and the County Palatine then built this brand new campus in 1933 out here in Ormskirk, and we've been in Ormskirk ever since. We started to allow men across the threshold in 1959. I think, if I understand what I'm told by others, plenty climbed over and into the building before then, but they're only here there officially from 1959. And the university has just grown and expanded over that time, I guess for us, culminating in the success of being identified as the Times Higher University of the Year last year. Now, through that time, actually, the English has always actually been, it's one of the founding disciplines of the university. And we have had, therefore, English graduates going in to teach English, right the way back, in, I think, 1892, the very first ones. And actually, if you go back to 1892, there are only 2 places in England in which women could get an honours degree, to train to teach. And those 2 places were actually Edgehill and Cambridge. The only difference was that it was not until 1948 that a woman could actually graduate formally from Cambridge. They could do the same exams, but they weren't allowed to formally graduate. And so Edgehill was a pioneer. There's links to the suffragette movement, there's links to the trade union, Edgehill women, Edgehill English graduates actually working in the dock workers' strike in 1910, educating the dock workers, so that input there. And actually the first Labour Chancellor, Philip Snowden, whose biography I've read on 2 or 3 occasions, his first partner was an Edgehill graduate, a woman called Ethel Anakin. And actually, if you do read his biography, it's very clear, actually, who was actually running the Chancellor of the Exchequer's responsibilities in the 1920s, and it wasn't Philip Snowden. So so the background is interesting. More recently, of course, let's say the university, English was one of the founding degrees of the university when it moved out of teacher training as well. 1973, we had our first English degree programmes, one of just 4 subjects offered in the university outside education and health. And of course, that has now grown and expanded. Clearly we have our creative writing programmes, we have specialist programmes in language as well as in literature. And it's one of the areas in which I think we're most proud, particularly in terms of the research record as well. The work of English staff around the Short Story Prize, for example, which has been won by a whole range of eminent authors over the last, and this is the 10th year of that prize. If someone comes to university, then they're giving you 3 years of their lives. Now, the most important single thing we do is have to give them an academic education. But I'm actually very interested in the way in which we actually help to support the person to develop as a complete entity. So we do provide very high quality sports facilities, for example. We do encourage students to volunteer. We run 2 theatres, we run our own cinema. And actually providing those range of opportunities, which I think help people to develop academically, but also actually give them industry relevant skills is incredibly important. A couple of examples of that. You might know actually that about 3 or 4 years ago, the university set up its own record label. And we've been working with Park Street Studios, where Coldplay, I think, recorded their first 2 albums. And I think we've now recorded 6 singles. We've actually had, one of the bands was signed to Heavenly Records, for example. Another band, actually, Orangi Sun, were actually in the recording studio this week, actually working with one of the big sort of, recording companies. And so, that activity taking place in that location is one example. And I think actually the idea from the English department as well, we're running a music label, we're running a short story prize. Why don't we actually also give students the industry experience of being involved in actually setting up and running a press? And actually, we had that discussion with Freight Books, who are a very well-known sort of independent publisher based out of Glasgow. They're working closely with us. What we're going to do, I think, the first book which will come out of this will come out this summer, and it'll be an anthology which is based upon shortlisted and winning entries for the Short Story Prize. The names of the authors associated with that will mean, I think, the press starts with a real bang. And also then the university has a tremendous record for poetry. And I think after that, we're possibly looking at an anthology of modern and contemporary poetry. And we will be looking to publish something, at least 1 or 2 publications each year. From the university's perspective, we're putting a 5-figure sum into that, but just think of the experience the students get, of actually working with prominent authors, of editing, of actually looking at how you put a book together or a collection together. You're looking at how you market it. Actually working with Freight Books to actually see perhaps where you procure the production of that, the setting, the printing, and so on of that book. And we think it offers a tremendous opportunity for young people. Universities are here actually to create a better and better experience, it seems to me. The way in which you do that is, yes, we do generate surpluses, but immediately those surpluses are poured straight back in to the student experience, put them into better facilities, put them into additional teaching staff, put them into better equipment and so on. I mean, there's no point, for example, a student actually working in your area actually not being able to work with the very best and the newest technology. We want to make them employable, to be attractive to your industry and to other industries. And to do that, you've got to invest. You've got to invest in the staff, you've got to invest in the facilities. And one of the consequences of that is that although Edge Hill is not perfect and there's still a distance to travel, it's a university which actually is very, very definitely moving in the right direction.
I'm here to talk about Edge Hill University Press, which we've just set up. I say we, myself and my co-director, Rog Glass, who teaches fiction and the short story here. When I was appointed, which was about 1.5 years ago, I thought, what could we add? Is there something missing in terms of being able to involve students and have cultural industries experience? And myself and Rog, we just had a discussion about the possibility of a press. We've both been editing for literature presses for the last, well, myself, 5-6 years, and Rog similarly. And we thought that we wanted to get a student-led team to work on different books each year, going through the genres of the creative writing department. So, in the summer, we decided to start the first book rolling and get a student team. And they are working on a book which is 10 years of the Edge Hill Short Story Prize. So the prize has national and international recognition, and we wanted to essentially create an anthology that would celebrate 10 years of the press. Currently, 6 students from all years, first, second, third year, postgraduate students, are now working on this project. And the early news is very positive, I think, here. They're getting a lot of direct experience that you can't otherwise get in a university degree. And they are arranging, at this point, festival appearances for authors from the book, which is going to launch at I believe, in September of this year. It's an exciting time for Edge Hill Press. What we're going to do, even now at this embryonic stage, is we're preparing to have a book of poetry next year, which I will edit with another professor here, Professor Robert Shepherd of poetry. He and I are working on a book at present. Again, the same process of galvanizing a student-led team, giving them direct industry experience. And we're looking for books that we can potentially teach, but also books that will have national and international significance. Rog and I interviewed several students from the university. It was a very democratic process. It was great fun. It was an exhausting 2 days, actually, if I'm honest about it, because we had a lot of students who were very, very keen to be involved in this project. And we wanted all 3 years to be included. And that's what's happened. The university have been really keen to get behind it and have been enabling us to bring in a very strong student-led team. But also in giving us financial backing and That will enable we're hoping that the students and ourselves together in collaboration will organise a tour going through Britain, Scotland, perhaps internationally. Same with each book. So what you get with the Short Story Prize is we've had some great writers who have won, people like Kevin Barry, Adam Marek, John Burnside John Burnside won a couple of years ago. And it's going to be, I'm biased of course, but it's going to be a really terrific book that has commercially successful authors, but authors also who are very important in terms of embodying what we do here at Edge Hill University in teaching short fiction. And the same will happen with the poetry book. I can tell you that the poets involved are, as I say, transatlantic, but also these are the poets we often teach here at Edge Hill in terms of poetry, my specialism. We like to teach, as far as possible, international poetries, not poetry singular, and we like to teach poets who have some kind of regard for innovative poetics. So that's really very important to the kind of aesthetic of the book. So I think this has been seen quite widely from the university, and that's why they're keen to embody something that already organically exists within our teaching methods. So yeah, it's an exciting future, I think, for the press.
Welcome back to About Books. In part 2, we talked to Alisa Cox, Professor of Short Fiction at Edge Hill University, about her love of the short story. Hi and welcome to About Books. I'm here with Professor Alisa Cox, who's Professor of Short Fiction at Edge Hill University and the only Professor of Short Fiction in the world. Alisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us how you got involved in short fiction in the first place. You've written several books, here are just a couple, but tell us a bit about your path.
Well, as a young writer, you imagine that you're going to be a great novelist. And so I used to try and write these great novels of growing up in the West Midlands and stuff like that, and being a young mother and all those things. And I kept on trying to write novels which actually weren't very good. What I was good at was the short story, because in the short story it's all about the language and the experience and getting inside people's heads. You don't have to explain what people do for a living, how they get from one room into another room, what happens to everyone at the end. You can just jump right in. So I started writing short stories. I started getting them published. I won a couple of prizes, like the Stand International Prize for my stories. And it went on from there, really.
Oh, cool. Would you say that the short story is a neglected genre in comparison with others?
It has been. That things are changing a little bit now, because nowadays you can read a lot more reviews of short stories. There are young writers like Lucy Wood, who writes sort of Cornish modern-day fairy tales, whose first collections are short stories. And those are with mainstream publishers. They're not just with the independent presses. People have always read short stories and they've always loved them, and small presses have always published them. But there has tended to be this dominance of the novel. So even now, you might write a brilliant collection of short stories, and you'll find that when you show them to an agent, the agent will say, "Oh, that's great, but tell me about the novel that you're working on, and we'll try and sell that." It is changing a little bit.
And you're doing all you can to try to make that sort of change, aren't you, and raise the profile of short fiction generally?
That's right.
You created the Edge Hill Short Story Prize, for example. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, this is the 10th year of the Edge Hill Prize. It's the 10th year, and the prize is absolutely unique in the UK because it's awarded to the author of a published short story collection. So it's submitted through publishers. And we aim to be like the Booker Prize, but for the short story. And we've had some great winners over the 10 years. The first winner was Colm to Bean. The most recent winner was Kirsty Gunn with Infidelities, and she's going to be reading here at Edge Hill on March the 9th. It's been a great year, and for the 10th year, the prize money is going up to £10,000, which is...
You've had lots and lots of submissions as well, haven't you?
Yes.
This is generating a lot of interest, and the prize giving's down in London, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be in July, it's going to be at Waterstones, Piccadilly, and it's going to be an open event with readings this time. So another factor in the rise and rise of the short story is that every year we get more submissions. I'm expecting we'll get sort of 30 to 40 this year. And they range from everything from science fiction and fantasy to really literary short stories, comic stories, shorts and long stories. There's so much going on.
Is there a canon like within the short fiction world of the kinds of short fictions that are prioritised over others?
Well, it's tended to be the sort of literary short story that comes from people like Chekhov and modernist writers like James Joyce and Catherine Mansfield. And I love those sorts of stories that are very mysterious and give you a glimpse of the life. And most recently, of course, there's Alice Munro, who won the Nobel Prize in 2013.
You've done a lot of work on Munro, haven't
I have.
you? Yeah.
I've written a book on Alice Munro called, surprisingly enough, Alice Munro.
Awesome.
And I've written lots of articles about her work. And I've written most recently a chapter on her last collection called Dear Life, which will be her final collection. And reading writers like Alice Munro has been one of the things that's made me enthusiastic about the genre. But there are other sorts of short stories as well. Science fiction stories, really important. One year, the winner of the Edgehill Prize was Chris Beckett, who's a great science fiction writer. And it meant a lot to him that he was being recognised for his writing. So marginalised as a short story writer, on the fringes of things as a science fiction writer. But science fiction isn't just for geeks.
Cool, that's awesome. Now, your most famous collection of short stories is probably The Real Louise.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Which was published in 2009 with Headland.
Yes, well, Headland Press, Liverpool, Wirral-based press, a Merseyside-based press, I should say. I don't want to offend people, but I talk about the other side of the water as Liverpool. Yeah, Headland Press, in fact, that's my only collection. I'm working on another one so far.
I was going to ask what you were doing right now.
Yes, I've published stories all over the place. There's a story coming out quite soon with Anthology, which is Unthanked Books, a small publisher. And there's a whole collection of stories based around a series of paintings called The End. And mine is called Coup de Grace.
Oh, cool.
And it will be out in April.
And you've just published this too, in the British Short Stories 2014. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this particular story?
Fate for the Hostages was a commission from the Bluecoats. And the Bluecoat had a great exhibition in 2013 called 3 a.m., Wonder, Paranoia and the Restless Night. And the exhibition was all about that weird time between sleeping and waking.
Okay.
And I had so many ideas. It was so exciting to be commissioned for that. In the end, I did a story that had 3 strands and was working on what it's like to be between time zones, as well as about insomnia. It's called Hope Fades for the Hostages because at the beginning of the story, there's an insomniac who is wandering about the house at night, picking up newspapers, and she just sees that headline.
Okay.
So it's just one of those phrases that's a bit of a cliche, one of those newspaper cliches, and something that might float into your mind. And that's something you can do with short stories. You can just pull in all kinds of random things and put them together and see what happens.
Do you find that your local area inspires you as well as those kinds of global phenomena?
Well, I've lived in Liverpool for 10 years. I'm originally from the West Midlands. I spent a lot of time in Manchester. Being in the city has been wonderful for me. I really like, for instance, being near the sea, well, it's not the sea, being near the estuary and looking out over the sands, over Crosby Beach, and over onto the Wirral and beyond that to Wales and Anglesey. And in fact, the story Coup de Grace, which is about to come out, is partially set on that day when the three queens came in.
Oh, fantastic. That was the 25th of May, wasn't it?
It was something like that. I might have had a bit of license with the exact setting, but it's all to do with it's not all to do with the atmosphere, it's partially to do with the atmosphere of being out of that day. And I've written about Crosby Beach quite a lot, actually. Maybe I should call the next collection Crosby Beach.
Have you got any advice for people who are writing? I mean, do you write every single day? Do you have that kind of discipline? How does it work?
I do. I write first thing in the morning, and a lot of writers do that.
Do you get up mega early to do it and slot it in?
I try to. It doesn't always work out, but I generally get up early, sit at my desk, and pick up whatever I'm writing on. So writing every day is really important. It's like exercising on the piano there. Yeah. You have to do it, and it's opening your mind to whatever's going on. You can turn it into words. It becomes an instinct to do that. The other advice, don't worry about plot. Don't think, I've got to think of a fantastic plot before I write this story. Perhaps the most important piece of advice is just read.
I think reading's really important as a writer.
You don't go anywhere without a book.
Fantastic advice. Yeah. Cool. And who are your favourite short fiction writers? Obviously, there's Alice Munro. But who else are you inspired by?
I like Helen Simpson's work very much. I like Catherine Mansfield very much. And I'm speaking about Catherine Mansfield at a conference in the south of France in June, which is something I'm looking forward to, being with Catherine Mansfield scholars and being where Catherine Mansfield used to live.
My favourite story of hers is a dill pickle.
Oh, that's great. It's very funny. It sends up the whole idea of travel and
ambiguity at the end, the mystery. Do you think mystery is a big part of the genre?
Absolutely. So many writers have said that. There are a lot. When you ask me which are my favourite writers, it's very hard to answer that. But writers like Anne Enright, she says that for her, writing a short story is easy and difficult at the same time. It's like walking. How do you do it? She's not sure. And maybe thinking about it might stop you doing the walking.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. So that's Alisa Cox, author of The Real Louise and Other Stories, and with a new story out in the Best British Short Stories 2014. Thank you for watching About Books. We'll see you next time.